Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for me.
Cool. So as Martin mentioned, I'm Natalia Sketchley. I'm the online PR campaign manager at Blueclaw, and Jordan Hilliard will be joining me as well. He's our senior SEO lead.
That's great. Thank you for the introduction, Nat. As Martin previously said, we've got a lot of iGaming experience, a lot of sport betting brands we've worked with previously and still currently working with. And in terms of digital PR, we've received a lot of coverage from a lot of names that I'm sure you'll all know, such as Daily Mail, Daily Star, Metro, as well as the actual websites or press releases more related to gaming as well. But first things first, how do we utilize digital PR and link building to enhance your SEO? So to begin with, it's good to understand what backlink tactics have been going on in the industry and what we are trying to achieve when we talk about enhancing your SEO performance. So to give you a bit of an overview of what that actually means. So Google have been stating for a long time what they want to see from websites, but their ability to be able to actually crawl and understand your website in such a way to be able to accurately see this has been developing over the last few years. When I'm talking about E, what do I mean with this? I mean ease for expertise, authority, and trust. Now, how does this relate to your backlink portfolio? So expertise is talking about the expert knowledge of the content subject on your website, or in our case, on the assets that we're creating. Authority talks about the topically relevant backlinks. So I'm talking about backlinks where the anchor text is talking about sports betting or iGaming, or from press release or publications related to the industry that you're working in. And the trust element is talking about authoritative backlinks, not spam. So I've actually pulled up a graph here, which is a company which I've previously worked on. And as you can see with the timelines on it, the top graph shows the amount of linking domains, the amount of backlinks they had to the site, and the bottom graph shows the keywords that they were ranking for. And as you can see, during the end of 2018, there was a huge spike in the amount of backlinks they received. And this was a paid backlinking campaign which they conducted. And off the back of that, they actually saw a huge growth in keywords, what they were ranking for. Now, the top graph and the bottom graph don't correlate past 2019, in particular March. Now, what that was is there's a core algorithm update in March where Google's ability to understand the trust element from the backlink portfolio was improved. And they found out essentially that all of these links which were generated at the end of 2018 were paid. They had no authority, and they completely lost the trust element to the website. Since then, they continued to create links to this site, but they didn't receive any of the benefit because they'd already harmed the trust element of their website. So this is when we talk about eating backlinking tactics. The paid backlinking tactics that used to be successful are no longer successful. We have to move into a more organic, a more genuine, authentic way to actually receive backlinks, to receive that trust element and the authority to your site. And this is the tactic in which we're presenting today.
So when it comes to PR and the gambling sector, it seems like a very tough hill to climb. So you feel like journalists won't want to feature a gambling brand. So you turn to buying links, but as Jordan mentioned, Google is becoming more adept at finding those and penalizing those sites. So it's not just as easy as doing that anymore. Sometimes generating ideas relevant to the brand seems like it's very difficult. Is the brand even authoritative enough to be producing this lifestyle type campaigns and targeting top tier media? So how do you get into the Daily Mail, Daily Star, all those things? Branded B2B links aren't enough. So you need to be able to broaden out your linking strategy in that way. Sometimes it seems too hard to target specific landing pages and keywords. And then thinking about compliance and legal issues. I know during COVID-19, it's been very difficult because you don't want to be showing that you're benefiting off of the situation. So obviously these are different challenges that you're facing constantly, and you have to be quick on your feet and think of think outside the box, think of different ways that you can still generate those backlinks and that brand exposure to your brand, but also thinking outside of just getting into the gaming and gambling industry publications. But never mind, there's still a way. Where there's a will, there is a way. So we just need to be organized and honest. You need to be, from a digital PR perspective, you need to be honest with journalists. So it's not just, here's a campaign, do you like it or not? It's justifying why the campaign has been created on behalf of the brand. So is it in line with target demographics? Is there a natural link? It's really easy. Well, it's easier with sports betting and entertainment. You can kind of create broader correlations. You want to raise brand awareness. If you've got a responsible brand, use that. You can definitely use that to your advantage. So do you have any gamble aware initiatives? Those are the sorts of things that you can still be promoting and still get those high tier publications to link back. And then does the piece itself have a natural tie-in to your target keywords? One of the things that we also try to do is conduct pre-outreach. So that way we already know what the journalist wants. We can always go back to them once the piece has been created. We can take their feedback and add it into the piece. Maybe there's an angle that they're really interested in that you didn't think of, and that might be something that you can incorporate into the piece so that it is more journalist friendly. And then you want to be using reliable sources and always keep track of them. So, whether it's data, whether it's the any expert commentary that you've added into your press releases, you want to be able to kind of keep track of all of that. You don't know when you're going to need it again. You don't know when you can reach out to that person again who gave you expert commentary on one campaign, and you can still use them in a different way for a different campaign. So it's good to kind of keep a database of where you're getting coverage, so you can build those relationships with journalists, but you also keep a database of your sources, so you can always go back to them. You can always, repivot. You can always make an older piece fresh again. Those are the sorts of things that you always want to be thinking about with digital PR. And trust us, if the story is strong enough, journalists won't really care where it's from. But how do we get there?
So to begin with, we need to do research. When it comes to PR, we're not just trying to think of, oh, this is interesting. It goes a lot further than this, because it has to relate to actual SEO organic performance. We're trying to find a way to increase rankings. Essentially, it's not just about PR. It has to relate back to your organic performance. So what we try to understand is, where are you currently right now? And the way that we do this is we check the most linked to pages that you have currently, the pages which are most likely to rank. Now, this gives us our prioritization of, what pages we're trying to see this performance increase to, which pages are going to have the biggest impact, what's the right priority, and, striking the right balance. When it comes to campaigns, you can insert more than a single link. So it might be to the homepage, might be to your core landing page, which brings in your most money, might be to a more informational page, depending on what kind of angle that you're going for. Then we move into the competitor gap analysis. So this gives us an understanding of, okay, what's currently working in your industry? What are your competitors doing, which are actually attracting this authoritative links to their site? What sort of angles are they going for? Now, this helps inform our wish list media and what publications should we try to target? What journalists are these that we're trying to target? And, it gives us an idea of our target wish list, essentially. And then once we've got this analysis, we can start making a content marketing based link earning strategy, not just for the short term, but for the medium and long term as well, because this isn't something that happens overnight. It takes a while to create the ideas, to do the outreach, and then there might be several pieces of outreach. It might be a 12-month plan down to a 3-month plan. How do we find this information? So we look at yours and your competitors' backlink portfolio. Now, this will be used in several tools. I've highlighted 3 of the most popular ones in the industry here, which is Moz, Ahrefs, and Majestics. Now, each one of these have their own created metrics to demonstrate Google's PageRank factor. Now, Google's PageRank factor is something which is kept secret. Nobody in the industry can actually tell you exactly what it is. But Moz, Ahrefs, and Majestics have all created their own metrics, which try to relay it back to what they consider the PageRank is, because they analyze so many links, so many websites. They have the best understanding, or the closest understanding to Google's page rank factor. Now, the way that we can use these metrics are from, we use several from each one, which is trust flow, topical trust flow, citation flow, domain authority, spam score, domain rating, the amount of referring domains, and the amount of backlinks. All of these don't give you the exact answer to the page rank, but using them all in combination gives us the closest picture that we can get to Google's page rank factor, and that gives us the best route to success.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. And then we move on to the link velocity. Now, this is more to do with how we can actually see success. When it comes to PR campaigns, we can do a great job, but if your competitor's doing 2 great jobs a month, we might need to up how many we're trying to receive, how many campaigns that we need to go out with, because ultimately when it comes to ranking, you're only competing with your market, no one else. So if your competitors are doing a lot more activity, we need to up the activity to be able to close that gap. So this is essentially what link velocity is. How many links are they receiving each month? Not just in terms of the amount of links, but it relates back to authority as well. So it gives us a picture of how much activity we need to do each month.
So some of the successful content themes that we've seen in the past, just from the different content discovery phases that we've gone through, for both internally for our own clients as well as their competitors, we see that video games and esports do really well. A lot of entertainment and lifestyle in general do really well. Celebrity, so personal earnings, charitable donations, social media, those are always big. There's something always out there around that. So it's starting to get a little saturated, but you can always pivot it. There's always some other angle that you can take. Finance, so a big number makes a great impression, and you can extrapolate some data and create predictions as well. So that gives you a bit of an USP in that. Leveraging your own customer data. So, obviously it's not always super easy and you don't want to give a lot away, but is there something within your customer data that can give you an insight to create a bigger piece? And then use existing data sets online. Eco is also a really big story trend that we're seeing. So the impact on the environment, whether that's from clubs, individuals, fans, the use of certain video games, all that sort of thing really creates really good press releases that journalists want to be using and to create stories. So another thing that we want to look at, besides just the SEO insights, is looking at the audience insights. So you might have an idea of who your audience is, or what audience you're targeting, that is your business plan. But you can sometimes find something different on the internet. So using Google Analytics, you can get an idea of how people interact with your own site, who is interacting with your site. But then using Facebook audiences can give you a real glimpse into the target audience and the behavior on and off site. So for instance, with that example we've got here, I've just looked at the United Kingdom and put in for those that are interested in online gambling and sports. And you get demographic data, which you can kind of compare and contrast with the stuff that you're getting through Google Analytics, but sometimes it can give you some other insights. So, looking at some of the page likes, you can kind of get create a picture of what your audience likes. So with this, I can see that those who are interested in gambling also like a bargain. They like to be on Groupon. You can also get a glimpse of what media they interact with, and that can also impact how you create a media list. So if you see that they're more interested in tabloids, then you can kind of focus on getting that top tier backlink from a tabloid versus some of the broadsheets. Or maybe it's the type of sites or what they're interested in. So maybe they're really interested in video games. You can create a content piece around video games. So that sort of thing can really create a much broader picture for the types of content that you can be creating, rather than just focusing on like something that is super narrow. And then all of this information will help create a campaign that naturally links to the brand. So what we try to do is create, put in internal links within campaigns. So that will be informed by the SEO strategy. And then we would put this in the content copy within the about section or a main splash. Also, and then create an appropriate anchor text as well. And that's informed by the keyword strategy. So that way, when you do get a backlink to the piece, that link juice per se will filter through to that targeted page as well. You will be able to spread it out a little bit. You don't want to put too many anchor phrases and anchor links into it, because then you just dilute it, but you do get some of that boost into the rest of your site.
So I wanted to go a bit further in talking about what this actually means for your business. What we're essentially doing is trying to share the wealth of this link equity or link juice, as Nat said, across your website, but not just across your whole domain as a whole. We're trying to target specific keywords or specific pages which we want to rank more, which is why I've got the meme of the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2. What we mean by that is, the keywords which are just on page 2, they might have a lot of search volume, but you're receiving no actual traffic from it. You're just outside of the traffic capturing position. So these are the sort of keywords that we're going to try to target. The ones that just need that bit of boost, that just need that bit more trust and authority given to them through the internal linking of the backlink campaigns that we're doing to reach those real traffic earning spots. Now, how we do this is we use tools such as Semrush to identify, where your keywords are currently and what pages these keywords are on. And then we create internal links to these pages using optimized, and I say yet natural, because you've got to make it naturally fit within the content. You don't want to make it appear as spam. Google's getting even better at finding, over optimized keywords. So optimized yet natural anchor text pointing at this ideal landing page, which just needs that little bit of boost to actually start receiving traffic.
And just like before, use data to back you up. So when you actually get to the ideation stage and building the campaigns themselves, you want to be using data. Data will not only create a USP for you, but it will make sure that it is interesting to a journalist. It's backed up in some sort of fact. Even the most creative piece will still have some data behind it to kind of anchor it, let's say. So some of the things that you want to be looking at is the internal data, which we've mentioned before, looking at location data, so regional data from surveys, international comparisons are good. Historical data, looking at annual reports, government updates, sports statistics, they're all out there for you to be using. You can create a story from that. Look at external data. You can create your own surveys. You can look at search trends, look at ONS and national stats. You can make, from all of this data, you can create your own predictions as well. So, we can always, we use our data team to help us create a story sometimes because we're almost there, but we just need them to work their magic on it, essentially. So data can always create a story for you. You just need to be able to find that story and find a way to manipulate it so that you have something that you can sell that a journalist can't do on their own time. So just a few examples of what we've done in the past. So this one, how to become an esports champion. This got a lot of coverage. Again, the big numbers are the ones that really interest people. So we've got top esports players set to earn $3.2 million in 2019. Or we've got a bit of a country comparison. So we've got China to become leading esports nation by earnings in 2019. So again, this was all data that is available. We didn't have to go out and do a survey or anything like that. This was data that you could find, and then we create these predictions based off of it. Celebrity spend. So just going back to the types of content that do really well, we mentioned celebrity. Celebrity does very well. This one looked at the Instagram earnings of celebrities. So we've got Lewis Hamilton from F1, and yeah, we get a lot of different places giving him coverage. So we got Charity Digital, you've got Give Me Sport, you've got a tabloid in there. And then these are just some examples of the free data sources that we use and that are out there on the internet that anyone can use. It is really important to kind of keep track of all of these as much as you can. Sometimes you can set up to their newsletters so that you know when new bits have come out, and then you can always stay on top of what is trending as well. So you've used all the data, you've found all this data, you've got a great idea. What does that look like now? So from a digital PR perspective, you need to think like a journalist. It sounds a bit cheesy, but it is important. You want to make sure it's relevant to them. You don't be afraid to like stalk them on the internet, in the sense that you go on their Twitter, you see what they're writing about, you go onto the actual articles that they write about, find out what their style is, kind of tailor it to that. And you want to be building journalist relationships. Even when I get a rejection, I always try to build a relationship with that journalist and say, that's fine. How do I make it better for the future? How do I make sure I give you just the perfect thing? Because this was right outside of that. So you want to always kind of keep that conversation going as much as you can. You don't know when they'll be able to help you out with something. Sometimes it's not for them, but they mentioned someone else who would be interested in. So it's always important to keep that conversation going. Don't let it just stop when they say no, or when they say yes, always follow up. So this also kind of comes down to it's quality over quantity. So high volume of outreach is not always necessary. If you get the right person, if you have a really strong media list, you won't need to be constantly pitching things or changing things. So it's really important to get it right from the beginning. However, things change. When you start with an idea, that week maybe there's breaking news, and if you can tailor and repivot your idea around that, that's great. So don't be afraid to like change something even at the last minute to make it work. And this is just some feedback from journalists in the past of what they're looking for. Again, storytelling is critical, and those different angles, as I mentioned, you don't want to be going out with a story that is singular. You want to be able to kind of create different angles around it, whether there's a finance angle or whether there's a bit of an emotional like insight angle. You want to be able to make your story tell multiple stories. And then when it comes to approaching journalists, once you have your media list, which will be influenced by the research that we've done in the beginning, and then doing more research as you create the asset, you kind of want to go through different like rounds of outreach. So we tend to go for nationals first and offer exclusives. That way they can, if they want an exclusive quote along with the piece and that sort of thing, it kind of improves your chances of getting into those big sites, which sometimes get syndicated, which again adds up to the links that you're building. You look at your wish list media, so that's derived from the link gap analysis, as we mentioned. You're targeting specific journalists, and these websites will hopefully make the most impact because this is where your competitors are, or this is where it is most relevant to what you're creating or to your site. And then re-engage with the pre-outreach contacts. Like I mentioned before, when you're testing an idea, you can go back to them and say, look, this is what we've created. And usually you already know who was interested from the get-go. So again, you can improve your rate of getting that link. And then lastly, leverage existing relationships. So prioritize contacts from the past that have linked for you, that you have those relationships with. And then this is just a bit of insight into the top tier linking publications. So this analyzed over 10,000 articles and just shows which of the nationals are linking the most. It is really popular to say that, oh, the nationals aren't going to link, but actually we do find that a lot of them do put external links. And even if they don't do it from the get-go, don't be afraid to ask. Sometimes they just forget, or sometimes it just accidentally gets stripped out. So you can still get that link. So always follow up no matter what. Again, it helps build that relationship anyways. So you can just see, like, for example, that the Independent and the Sun tend to link more than the others, but that doesn't mean that the other rates aren't bad. So you think that's it? You've built the links, that's all you have to do. Well, no, you've got a little bit more.
Yes, now we need to move on to measuring success. And when it comes to measuring success, I mean, there's two elements to this. First, we want to know how successful the campaign was and how it relates to your business. But also, the reason why you should measure success is because, as I mentioned before, we have short, medium, and long-term strategies around our PR campaigns. It might be that your plan is to do a campaign each quarter. And what you should do is you should take the learnings from the first campaign. How did it work? Did we do better with national in terms of this angle, or is it better at regionals, or are we going for the more topical elements of it? We need to take the learn and improve approach at each time, because the market's always changing as well. Is the stories that we need to focus on going to change? But when it actually comes down to measuring success, how do we do this? So it's a lot of the metrics that we're talking about in terms of the pre-analysis before we actually create the strategy. So looking at the DA of the links, of the trust flow, the citation flow, the amount of links. But then it's also how we can relate that back into the actual website. So what's happened to your visibility on these pages? These pages that we wanted to improve. Are you seeing that the click-through rates of it are going up? Are we seeing that the visibility through and improved keyword rankings are going up? How many links did this actually secure? What type of links? Are they followed, no followed, or are they citations? Ultimately, what we're trying to do is get an uplift on rankings. But all of these are hints towards how actual successful this campaign is.
So this is just one example, just to show what the impact of a campaign can be. Eco-friendly footballers. This looked at the carbon footprint of the Ballon d'Or nominees. So this just was an easy little breakdown of what their travel during the Champions League season looks like in terms of their carbon footprint. As you can see, it got great coverage, but what did that do for the site?
So this is where we talk about organic visibility and how it actually translates to the business. So visibility is a metric to understand how the search volume and the rankings impact. So it's giving an overall how much are you being seen. It's related to the Google Search Console impressions metric as well. And what you'll see is it gradually increases over time. And this isn't just because you might not receive all the links on the first day of the campaign. We could be outreaching for an entire month if the campaign itself has got legs. But it's also because Google doesn't crawl every website every single day. It takes time for Google to find these links. It takes time to Google to attribute the link equity back to these sites, back to these pages. So it can take a little while to actually see this benefit. But as you can see, this is a client that we worked on previously, and the amount of actual visibility to this page significantly increased from the beginning of the campaign to the end of it. And again, this relates all back to the actual keywords that we're trying to target. And this is another one which we worked on previously. And what you can see is that we actually increased significantly. So we're talking about, the keywords which are, position 20, 23rd or 9th or 30th, getting them onto that first page, getting them onto traffic capture positions. Because previously these keywords, whilst doing okay, you wouldn't say they're doing that bad, but now they're actually receiving traffic from beforehand. They was getting nothing, whereas now they're actually receiving the benefit for ranking for these at all.
Just to give another example as well. So this is film franchise Showdown. This was tapping into that pop culture element, and it got a lot of coverage. This was comparing the production budget and the box office earnings, as well as critical reception of the 10 best film franchises, and then breaking it down by which one was the best overall, were there specific films in the franchises that did the best, and even the characters. So this one was, again, one of those where we had different angles that we went out with, and they all worked differently. Once we saw which one was working the best, that's one we would work with the most in terms of the press releases.
So when it comes to traffic comparisons, we're talking about two different elements again. So first of all, you've got the traffic that actually goes to the campaign landing pages. The people that are interested in this story and click on those links. How many people are coming to your site through the campaign, which is great. We're getting more visitors to the site. But ultimately, we're not just, the campaign itself isn't to bring in traffic through the campaign page. What we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the backlink portfolio to your site. So what we've shown here is with the traffic generated from the campaign landing page was just below 1,000, but this resulted in improving in rankings for their homepage, for keywords ranking on their homepage. And post the campaign, we actually saw a massive increase in sessions to that homepage through an increased keyword ranking, which is ultimately the goal for the campaign. That's where what we're trying to drive, because that's more of a longer term strategy. Bringing in those extra pieces of traffic, extra few hundred people in just through the campaign is great, but ultimately, once the campaign stops, you're going to lose that traffic. The traffic we generate to the homepage through an increased ranking, so it's a lot more longer term success. And this campaign in particular actually brought in 2,000 new sessions just to the site just through the campaign alone. And then we're starting to look at, what Google, this relates back to the very first thing where we talk about Google and how Google's changing its backlinking tactics. It's trying to improve its ability to understand how people are linking on websites. And Nat touched on the point that, not everyone is actually doing follow links all the time. They don't always link. They might just mention you. They might give you a no follow link, or it might be a sponsored or user generated link itself. Now, because Google's aware that big press companies are no longer linking because they're scared to lose their link equity from their site, they understand still that actually your name appearing in them is still it's a trust element. It's showing that you can be trusted, but the websites aren't linking to your site, so they're consistently updating their algorithms to adapt how the marketplace is seeing. So this is what we're seeing, where now Google has stated that no follow links do matter. They're a hint towards it. It might not be as strong as a follow link. A follow link is ideally what we're going to go for, but not everyone does follow links. So all of these other links are going towards the hint of improving that trust element to your website. And when it comes to what does the future look like, no one can predict the future. But what we can do is we can look at how the algorithm updates are changing. When you look 3-4 years ago, they're very specific in terms of trying to fix content issues, trying to fix the paid linking aspect issues, trying to go down into mobile speed. And, we are still going to see some shifts towards this. But when you look at the trend of the main algorithm updates over the last 2 years, that have all been core algorithm updates. Now, core algorithm updates don't target a specific metric, don't target a specific industry. They're not trying to fix just one thing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to align it to the ultimate goal of finding great content or trustworthy content, authoritative content for their users, for their search queries. And the trend just appears to be that the main focus for them right now are core algorithm updates, because they've fixed all of the extreme elements such as the paid link building that used to be done with the Penguin update. But they've still got a bit more work to do. They've still got, a tightening of the noose, exactly. And these core algorithm updates should be the main focus, other than potential user experience updates. The core algorithm updates are going to be the main focus, which is why the tactics of old no longer work, and they're actually going to become less and less effective. And you'll find that, the more organic, more natural PR campaigns are going to be a lot more successful, and it's going to be something that we all need to move towards.
Yeah, and just jumping off of that, in terms of digital PR, like we mentioned here, data is really key. I don't really see that going away. I think with the types of brands that seem scary to some journalists, if they see that you're using really good data, you're creating a really good story, they're not going to care. So it's always really important to make sure that your idea is tailored and anchored in some sort of fact that you can be speaking on. Sometimes it seems like you're pushing too far outside of the industry, especially with something like film franchise Showdown. I can see a little bit of that hesitation with that from the get-go, but you can still make it worthwhile. You can still make it relevant to your site. Superheroes are really common with like different slots, so you can make that comparison. You can start looking into that. You can, as long as you have it in your head that you can explain the idea and why in a sentence, that is always key. If you can do that, then anybody will be able to pick up the story. If you are woolly on it, then that's where it becomes a bit more of an issue. But as long as you get that very strong in terms of your outreach, you'll always be fine. It won't be too much of an issue. And then just in terms of the industry itself, I think it is important to be pushing outside of, going outside the box, thinking a little bit broader. I think creating different angles. Always think of, if your idea only has 3 angles, can you push for a 4th and 5th? If you are really struggling with that, maybe there needs to be more of a pivot into what the story is. I think it's always critical to have as many angles as possible, and create those press releases. Don't just rely on one. Don't always just rely on one way of pitching. You have to be creative in every step of the way, which is easier said than done. But kind of always be on top of what is trending, what is working, what are the buzzwords out there that will attract the journalist's attention and make it a good story for them to write about and for their readers to read about. And how do those readers kind of go back to your audience? Think of where other places that your audience lives. They're not always going to do just one thing. Think of their other likes. That's why Facebook Insights is a really good place to kind of get a bit of a understanding of other things that they are looking at and how you can find them there. I think that is pretty crucial, really. So we've got some time for questions. If anybody has anything before our next session.
There were 1 or 2 things that occurred to me, Natalia, while you were doing the presentation. I was wondering, talked a lot about digital PR. Do you do much with video and so on? Because I know from a lot of newspaper websites, news websites now are very keen to include as much video as possible. Is that something you would recommend?
I would recommend it if it's something that works for you. If you can make a really good video, then I think a video asset is always nice to have. It's one of those things where you don't want to just be selling a story just with words. You want to, have visualizations, and video is a really easy way of doing that. I don't think it works for everyone, so it just has to really make sense in terms of not only your budget, but like in terms of the story that you're creating. It is something that I definitely want to do more of, to investigate that more. We haven't done that too much, but is definitely something that, like you mentioned, it is very popular. So it's, kind of how can you push yourself that next step?
Okay, and I remember from days when I worked as a journalist, I did write endless stories on, particularly on a Friday, when it would be along the lines of X contestant is the favourite to be knocked out of whatever, X Factor, Dancing on Ice, or any of those things, every Friday without fail. I think mainly thanks to Ladbrokes, but I might have misremembered that. So are there themes like that you would recommend? Are there particular things that any sort of sports book could get started with? Or any sort of betting operator could get started with?
Yeah, definitely. So the way we kind of think of campaigns or ideas is more of like the bigger campaigns that will take a couple months to create. Then we have an always on approach. So that's something where if we see something in the news, can we write something that is relevant to the brand and kind of create it quickly? So like you mentioned, with kind of tying it to something timely. So for example, for the Super Bowl last year, we worked with a betting client, and they could give us the odds that there was going to be a wardrobe malfunction during the halftime show. And that got loads of links. And it was a very quick, like you have that information already. You create a press release and people are interested because it's, very timely. It's ahead of the show. So if you've any sort of thing like that is, if it doesn't take that much time and effort, the data is there. You just need someone to write it up and put it out there. It's not going to take that much time, and you can see quite a lot of linking and coverage through that. Whereas, sometimes you build these bigger things and you end up getting almost the same coverage. So it's kind of balancing that out, what works for you, what and what is kind of tying back into that overall strategy that you've come up with for SEO.
Okay, and sort of related to that, if you were planning a campaign for, I don't know, say the European Championships or the Cheltenham Festival, something like that, something which is a big betting event, how, when you start and work on that, if you're using this approach, is it almost a sort of year-round campaign for the annual events, or?
Well, you have those in mind, obviously. I tend to have a calendar and just see, what's coming up. Sometimes you need to be planning in quite ahead of time. So sometimes it'll be a 6 months ahead of time. Sometimes you don't need that much lead time. With the Super Bowl one, that was very quick. So it all depends on what your overall strategy is. If you're going to target keywords around, horse racing per se, you're going to be building other campaigns throughout the year, and you know that the Cheltenham one is your biggest one. Well, then you can kind of create smaller ones leading up, and then you make that big one, or whatever works for you. But it is really important to be able to be very quick on your feet, because even though an event is coming up, there are other things that are coming up in the media cycle that still might be relevant to you, that you can jump on and focus on and still get those relevant backlinks from. So it's not just about, you've got that ahead of the schedule. You also need to be thinking like kind of timely in terms of, being on Twitter or social media, looking at the constant articles that are coming out, so that you can always pivot to that if necessary. Can you always add something to it? It's basically, can you make a journalist's life easier?
Okay, yeah, I also remember from working as a journalist, given the workload that people who work on the sort of the online versions of those publications have, in terms of the volume of stories they have to get through every day.
Yeah.
Anything that becomes a sort of 15-20 minute turnaround on a story is hugely appreciated. So if you can format stuff that helps journalists to do their jobs, I think you'll be able to onto a winner with that kind of content. Yeah.
And even with, outside of the bigger nationals, some of the industry publications, like they also need that help, because they still need to create the content, and it might be a bit drier here and there. So if you can fill in those gaps for them, that is, always very appreciated.
Sure. Well, thank you for that.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. So just watching the slides, I noticed that I think it was a Telegraph that had something like 71%, and the Sun had 50% of external links. Now, from my view, that seemed to be very much a link farm. So at some point, that bubble will burst. What are the alternatives after that bubble does burst?
I don't necessarily think that, like, the Independent, the Sun, they're always going to be putting stories out. But in terms of, like, if you're going to always go to them every single time, the link equity back to you is not going to be as effective or as impactful every time. But it is still important to get your brand out there. It's still, like, these are well-read news sites. So I don't think it's bad to be on there. But like I said, you still need to diversify your backlink profile in general. So if you can create ideas that kind of run in different topic areas or niches, then you still will get the benefit that you need without necessarily having to rely on those every time.
I would also mention, in terms of what I'd consider a link farm. So a link farm to me is something which is it's a website created to generate links. It's a farm links essentially, and these big press releases are there as news stories. That press, the people are genuinely interested, and they're just linking naturally to sites which actually create this content. So I wouldn't consider it a link farm, and I don't believe that Google would consider the Sun, the Independent, the Express, or the Mirror a link farm either. Link farms are more of just websites which are created for that purpose of, for providing links.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of what a link farm is. second question. So given the Gambling Commission tightening RG controls, and with social media now not able to put out adverts, I guess, aimed at less than 25 plus age, how do you create content to mitigate things like that? Because obviously, you know, things like Cosmopolitan and other types of publications do get a younger readership. So how do you kind of mitigate the responsible gambling type issues with content?
So it's a bit of a weird one, that one, because I know what you're saying, that you have to, you know, you can't always control who's going to cover a story in that way. And it's, as long as the content that you're creating isn't like just promoting gambling, you'll be able to get around that for the most part, because you can always make that case that, you know, you will still find teenagers who are reading the big nationals, and if you find a national that's covered something that is tied to a gambling brand, you'd still run into that issue. So I think it's more of creating content that is not going to promote gambling like outright. If you're creating like a piece on like the best sites for this or that, you're not going to, I mean, most of the time you're not going to get that sort of coverage anyways. But yes, you have to be targeting those websites that will only cover that, and it's, you know, that has that regulation through. But if you're creating pieces on, like, you know, for instance, the Eco Footballers one, and that can get into places that, you know, a young person would be on, that piece itself is not promoting that gambling. It's giving information. It's using data that already exists out there. So I don't think you have to worry about that as much, as long as you have content that is not so tied back to like gambling, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions, or shall we jump into Amelia and Vignesh's presentation?
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on to part two. So thank you very much, Natalia and Jordan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Amelia, and I'm a paid media lead at Blueclaw. And the topic myself and Vignesh, our head of data, we're going to be covering is automation versus manual in paid search for sports betting. So please stick around if that's a topic that's useful to you. So I'll just share my screen. It says host disable participant screen sharing. Yeah, I'm not able to share my screen. Let me just try and leave and come back in. But Martin, are you the host?
Hi, I don't think I am. Ahmed, I think you're the host, so you can
I'm
make.
able to share now, actually.
Oh, right, okay,
Yeah,
there you go.
Perfect. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see that now. Thanks.
Okay, let's get started. So just to introduce myself a bit more, I work with clients across a number of sectors, from iGaming to sports betting to travel to B2B. And I've got experience across a number of paid media channels, including Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, Facebook Ads, and Apple Search Ads. So what is going to be covered in this section? I'm going to be doing a bit of a comparison today on the strengths and weaknesses of automation versus good old-fashioned manual when it comes to bidding, optimization, and as well as automation versus humans for discovering new keywords as well. And then Vignesh is going to follow up with some info on useful automated tools to improve paid search performance. So a few relevant ad scripts that might be useful for the sector. I'm going to touch on live data feed ad customizers as well, but feel free to jump in at any point if you've got questions, or at the end, whatever you prefer. So anyone that's run any sort of paid search within the sector probably knows that competition is very fierce, and it is sometimes difficult to squeeze out those margins of efficiency, just because the cost per clicks are so high, just because more and more advertisers are going after those same keywords, which means cost per clicks on those very top level terms are only going up and up. For example, already this year, we've seen the auction of key terms for during Cheltenham being pushed up as much as 30% year on year. So really, really stiff competition. With that being said, I think it's really important to get the most out of your campaigns and get conversion rate as strong as possible, just to make every click count, really. So I will start off with smart bidding versus manual, and kind of compare which drives better performance in the sector. But let me just summarize first a bit about what smart bidding is and how it works for those of you who might not know. According to Google, as of 2019, about 80% of a digital marketer's time is spent on manual tasks like bidding and optimization, while only about 20% is spent on actual strategy. I think I myself can vouch for that as well. I'd say it's probably the same ratio for me as well. But the benefit of using a smart bidding strategy is that in principle, it allows for a lot more kind of smarter working by automating some of those more routine tasks like device reviews and everyday keyword optimizations and things like that. And the algorithm works by using contextual signals to predict the conversion likelihood of a user, and then upweights or downweights a bid depending on this likelihood, and maximizes your chance of a profitable conversion. So those signals could be anything from time of day, location, device, demographics, user interests, and even prior user behavior, which is interesting because remarketing and use of audiences isn't allowed in Google Ads for the gambling sector when you're optimizing manually. It isn't completely clear whether previous site visits is still used for sports betting campaigns that are using a smart bidding strategy. Google hasn't disclosed that information, so there is the possibility that Google is using previous site visits as a factor when deciding bids, but yeah, we're a bit in the dark about that. But just to give an example of how smart bidding works, if Google knows that a user aged 18 to 25 is twice as likely to bet on a championship league term than any other age group, in theory, it will bid 2 times more for a user in that demographic. Obviously, that's just taking one factor into account, but the same principle applies, and the algorithm can take in many, many more signals. So now on to some of the benefits of smart bidding. I think the main benefit is that it can free up a lot of your time, as you aren't having to babysit campaigns. It takes care of all of the bid optimization, which leaves you with a lot more time for kind of deeper levels of account management like strategy reviews, ad copy testing, and landing page testing. And the algorithm can analyze up to 70 million signals, so advertisers using smart bidding have access to a much wider range of information about their target audiences than a human account manager would. And because of that, smart bidding can often drive much better campaign results. For example, you can see on the right here, I ran an experiment for about 3 weeks for an iGaming client, which tested our manual bid strategy versus a smart bidding strategy called Maximize Conversions, which specifically aims to get the most conversions as possible for your set budget. and that was tested on our competitor campaign. So it was exactly the same campaign running, but just a different bid strategy. And you can see here that both of the campaigns drove similar numbers of first-time deposits, but the Maximise Conversions campaign had a cost per acquisition of almost half that of the manual bidding campaign. And the performance for that smart bidding campaign was just improving as time went on, as it tends to do, because there is a bit of a learning period involved there. And you can see from the table below as well that it was able to achieve a lower cost per click than manual bidding, as well as driving higher conversion rates, which suggests to me that its optimizations are a lot more sophisticated than what I was capable of, sadly. But after that experiment that we did, we've since switched the manual bidding competitor campaign to use smart bidding permanently. I would usually probably recommend leaving the experiment at least 6 weeks to run, just because there is that learning period that I mentioned. But from our 3-week experiment that we did, we could already see that there was a huge difference in performance. So we felt quite confident that we could switch it over at that point. But I think that is how I would recommend introducing smart bidding strategies if you are hesitant to roll it out to every single campaign straight away, which I myself would definitely be cautious of doing as well. But yeah, creating an A/B test with your manual bidding campaign is a really good way to compare like for like, as all the other factors are obviously the same and you're running it at the same time. So now let's get on to some of the weaknesses or downfalls of smart bidding. If there are times when conversion rates fluctuate massively by time of day or day of week and don't follow a specific pattern, then you are less likely to see success with smart bidding. I think since the algorithm uses historic data to pick out the trends and try and calculate the most efficient bids given that past performance, it does tend to be better suited to campaigns where performance is more or less stable and CPCs aren't fluctuating massively, and there's not really a trend. So I personally tend to see better performance across smart bidding campaigns across gaming verticals, just because there aren't external events happening that can cause spikes and lulls in performance. I have seen success with smart bidding for sports betting accounts, but I do generally prefer a bit more of a hands-on approach with sportsbook versus casino, just because the performance can spike up and down depending on when fixtures are on, and there isn't always a strict pattern to the schedule. Most bidding algorithms upweight more recent performance data in their calculations as well. So in the case of a sportsbook, if there was a week of no sporting activity, then the algorithm would be more biased towards underbidding going into the following weekend and the following week. And because of that, even if there's a huge game on, campaigns might struggle to be visible enough on the SERP just to get a decent amount of volume of conversions or FTDs. So yeah, I would just be a bit wary of that. But the good news is if you are aware of that fact, then you can pause smart bidding campaigns when leagues have breaks and use manual bidding, and then reactivate when schedules are more regular again. Or you do also have the option to optimize manually completely, which I'll come on to in a minute. Another sort of cautionary point with smart bidding is that picking the wrong strategy will mean that you're not likely to see great results. So picking a strategy that fits with your goals is really, really important for success. I've outlined the main 3 strategies included on the slides. I won't go into the specifics too much, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people have on them. But nailing down the performance metrics from the get-go is really, really crucial. In sports betting, I guess this usually translates into a CPA target for new players, new depositing players. So target CPA bid strategy is often the most sort of straightforward to use, but Maximise Conversions is a really good option as well and can work really well. But I would say whichever bid strategy you decide, just be conscious of your customer lifetime value. and just make sure that your target CPA isn't above this figure. You can even segment your keywords into different buckets depending on the lifetime value for users coming through that specific sort of theme. For example, you might realize after a few months of running activity that boxing bettors might have double the lifetime value of tennis bettors, for example. So having a one size fits all target CPA strategy might not work as well if you know lifetime value for each of those buckets and have a slightly different CPA goal for each bucket. I think that's how you can really maximize your first time deposits and profit ultimately. But I think that's more something to consider if you've been running campaigns for a while, not so much if the account's fairly new. And then on the flip side, just going to talk a bit now about what can be achieved with manual bidding and kind of the pros and cons of doing it that way. So I think the first big thing is control. A lot of people prefer the idea that with manual bidding, control falls into the hands of the digital marketer and not the hands of Google. So obviously a human can look at performance and judge whether a keyword bid needs changing, and the power's there for them to solve the problem. And performance sort of has a more direct connection with human action and manual decisions. Whereas smart bidding is a bit more of a sort of black box of the unknown, and you can't necessarily see the logic that campaigns are running on. Another benefit is that humans can plan ahead and actually know exactly what fixtures and big tournaments are coming up. That might cause a surge in search volume and a conversion rate uplift, and ultimately bring in new players. So we can actually use that information if we know and plan strategy accordingly, specifically using, for example, manual time of day and day of week bid adjustments, because we know exactly which games are on when. And at the beginning of each week, you can go in and update accounts, add scheduling based on fixture schedules. It is a little bit more time consuming, but sometimes can be more effective in my experience. But obviously, if smart bidding is using machine learning, it doesn't know anything about future events. It can only really base its decisions off of historical data. So when there's not that pattern to the market changes, then the algorithm can sometimes find it difficult to keep up, and ad visibility suffers as a result. Whereas that's not so much of an issue if a person's going into a campaign and making those changes beforehand. Just as a side note as well, I would always recommend using manual bidding for your brand campaign, just because you always want to be aiming for 100% impression share there, just to defend your position against competitors. And now onto the weaknesses of managing accounts more manually. I think the most obvious sort of downfall is that manual optimization takes up a lot of time. Time's a very valuable resource, and it's also quite costly. So when you're giving your time to these activities, you're missing a bit of an opportunity to spend more time on activities that increase performance more, perhaps in the long run, and might have a broader impact, kind of more strategic thinking stuff. And there's also the problem of scale that arises, particularly in terms of processing power. So for a large account like a sportsbook account is likely to be, with multiple campaigns for sports, leagues, teams, and maybe even fixtures as well, managing those campaigns well can take a huge amount of manpower. If you think that you have to individually optimize each keyword and analyze factors that smart bidding automatically takes into account. So it is quite unlikely that any amount of human attention can achieve that optimal performance all the time without some help from automation. So you just have to sort of weigh up the extra costs of resources of manual optimization and just think about whether that's going to pay off in the difference in performance. So now we've considered how automation can work in terms of bidding and the pros and cons. I'm just going to touch on how automation can also be used to uncover new keywords, as that's ultimately how conversion volume is grown. So in theory, it is actually possible to run a full sportsbook PPC account without ever having to manually find and upload keywords yourself. Dynamic search ad campaigns can drive people to site by targeting a specific URL instead of using keywords. So when people search for terms that relate to a page on your site, an ad can be populated using that content on site as long as you supply the description line. So it's a very, very minimal effort required on your part to set these up. They can work well, especially if you've got lots of individual landing pages that are divided quite methodically. For example, different pages for betting on specific leagues and tournaments rather than just broken down by sport, although that can work as well. But generally, the more content that you have on a page, the better that dynamic search ads perform, because Google uses that information on the site to match what it deems to be the most relevant search queries. So if your site is fairly minimal in terms of the content, then it might not work so well, but I definitely wouldn't recommend using these as your sort of bread and butter campaigns, but I think they're best used to fill in the gaps of your keyword-based campaigns rather than to rely on solely. I think that keyword targeted campaigns generally do perform better, but the reason I've mentioned them in this context is because if you do use them in addition to your usual campaigns, then they can be a really good way to uncover gaps in your keyword set. You can see all the search terms that your targeted URLs have triggered for by looking in the search terms tab of your dynamic search ad campaign, and then add in those new keywords that you've seen have driven conversions for you there. I think that's a particularly useful exercise for finding longer tail keywords, which I think a successful sports betting account does need to rely on, just because those very high volume generic terms like football bets or sportsbook offer are very competitive and expensive. Another benefit of a DSA, dynamic search ad, which is unrelated to finding new keywords, but it's worth mentioning nonetheless, is that a dynamic search ad will automatically populate the headline to really closely match what the user is searching for in Google. You can also have this feature on a usual ad as well in a manual campaign, but you have to add in the keyword insertion feature. But with a dynamic search ad, the headlines automatically do this and can really help improve ad click-through rate. For example, if a user is searching for Spurs versus United odds, that would appear as the headline, which can be really useful if you have a very wide scope of queries that a user could be looking for. Saying that, you can also go through a similar process of adding converting search terms within manual campaigns as well. The main way that you'd grow your campaigns manually is through generic and competitor keywords, and then using a broad match modifier on those, so you're able to mine for keywords through your search query reports, similarly to how I just described with the dynamic search ad, and then go in and add those converting keywords to the account. And over time, that's going to build up and hopefully lead to increased reach and lower cost per clicks as well. I think you're less likely to uncover whole themes of keywords when you are mining a manual campaign, just because the sort of targeting is a bit more strict, because you do have to include, for example, the words football and bets, as you can see on the screen there, whereas with DSAs it can match to pretty much anything that's on your site page, but it is still a really worthwhile exercise, even if it is a little bit more time consuming. But I think if possible, just try and make your campaigns reflect the changes in the sporting schedules, and cover off those core events. Just try and make sure that you're adding new keywords all the time to get immediate coverage in terms of specific fixtures and league related keywords as well. so that once you've built up that base of keywords over a year or so, you can just keep them all live, and then people will only be searching for them anyway when there is the relevant game on. But as I mentioned before, because competition is very fierce among those broad terms, finding that low-hanging fruit can be a very time-consuming process, but it really does pay off. You can also use other channel insights to inform your paid search keyword set. For example, if you have an automated search match campaign in the App Store, if you've got an app that you're also promoting, I've found that to be really useful in the past. So looking in, for example, Apple search ads at your strongest performing terms, and then adding those into Google. Because if you think about it, everyone's going to be using keywords that Google Keyword Planner recommends, for example. So finding other ways to add new keywords is always a bonus. So just to wrap up, do I have to choose one or the other? I'll be weighing up both options, but the good news is that you don't have to exclusively use one or the other in terms of manual or automation. I think for finding new keywords and reaching new audiences in particular, I'd recommend using a mix of traditional campaigns and automated dynamic search ads, or testing them at least to see how performance compares. When it comes to smart bidding versus human bid management, I think the same rule applies. It's all about testing, and the only way to find out for sure which performs better in your account is to test. But generally speaking, I'd say smaller advertisers are probably better off keeping on top of things manually. But if you are slightly bigger and have upwards of, say, 15 to 20 campaigns with decent sized budgets, then I think it is worth at least considering smart bidding. I think that the power of the algorithm will kick in at that point if you've got a lot of data to work with, and will most likely outperform manual bidding, just because there is a lot more conversion data there, and it uses a lot more signals, as I mentioned before, so it can make a bit more of a sophisticated bid. That being said, as I mentioned before, I've personally seen better performance from smart bidding across gaming verticals, and I think a more hands-on approach in sportsbook accounts can sometimes be better just because of those spikes in performance that I mentioned that come with various fixtures. But I think overall the key to achieving better ROI is just about testing and experimentation. Sorry, I can't give a more polarizing stance on that. But yeah, it's all about test and learn. Machine learning does have incredible potential, but I think you shouldn't unleash it without proper testing first. And I don't doubt that in the future, these algorithms and other automation tools are going to become even more sophisticated and probably will wipe out pretty much all manual optimization, but not for a good few years, I would say. So I think I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to say about automation in paid search in terms of smart bidding. My colleague Vignesh is going to carry on the conversation now and discuss a few other ways that automation can boost paid search performance by looking at various ad scripts that would be useful for sportsbooks, and also how live feed ad customizers can boost ad click-through rate as well. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions now or after Vignesh has spoken. It's completely up to you guys. Maybe just go ahead with yours, Vignesh, and then we can answer any questions after.
Yeah, sure. I could get started. Martin, any thoughts? Could I just go on?
Yeah, I think if you want to go ahead with your part of the presentation, and then we will come to questions at the end.
Yeah. do let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see that now.
Yeah. So just a brief introduction about me. So I lead the data insights team here at Blueclaw. I have previously worked within the betting sector, which actually this presentation actually excites me to talk about our efforts within the betting sector. We currently use a very tech stack here at Blueclaw. So we source the web analytics data through APIs, primarily Google Analytics and Search Console data. And we try to use these data sources with external data sets to add like the extra contextual information and related to basically a forecasting on keyword data or related tied back to how the return on investment is. But this is mostly what we do amongst the other sort of queries posed by our clients. Most of our analysis is done on Python, and our reporting structures are Tableau and Power BI. So the key takeaways from today, I would just go over a few ad scripts, like Emilia mentioned. To have a key balance between automation and manual, I would just be focusing on what could make life easier and how a Google Ad scripts could help within the betting sector, and also the use of APIs, which some of the big players might be using, but also discuss the concept of APIs and use of APIs to add that extra layer of contextual information, and combine these two to see to come up with a more advanced, aggressive strategy towards paid search. So I'm sure some of you might have already be using Google Ad scripts, but just for those people who are unaware, it's basically scripts that it's just a programmatic way to control your Google Ads. It's a JavaScript based code that is fit into your browser based IDE, and you kind of use these scripts to automate like common procedures and and interact with external data sources. There are many links that I would be happy to share after this presentation for those scripts that are already online on the internet. I think there's a high chance if you are looking to automate a few processes, there is a high chance that you might find a Google Ad script for it already online. But in case it is a bit of if you are just entering or just getting to know about Google Ad scripts, it's basically a small JavaScript piece of code that you could use in your IDE, and then could help you build your code towards what you're trying to automate. So how does it work? It's a script that it reads out of your Google Sheet or your spreadsheet, which is primarily pre-populated with dates and times of uplift periods. And you could also use bid modifiers and duration of uplifts in the spreadsheet, which could be set dynamically as you move on with, say, games, or you could set these at a global level, which it's a predefined set of rules. The first type of script that I would like to speak about is the TV schedule bid coordination script. Say, for example, I think Natalia spoke about the Cheltenham Festival or the Grand National or the Premier League. We have a big event coming on the weekend. You could use these. You can use the script to like schedule these set of events on the game day. The typical use case would be to coordinate an uplift of bids with TV-based advertising campaigns. But there are other sets of possible use cases, like just scheduling these sports events, or like you could also use the script to set conversion rates closer to game times, because there's a lot of fluctuation in the market that is highly influenced by the bet volumes that come in and closer to the game time, and you could sync these scripts to the TV schedules, and you could upweight or downweight bids and have a more aggressive approach in your bidding strategies closer to time. Again, the script works in the same way. It basically reads off a pre-populated spreadsheet with dates and times of uplift periods. A few caveats for using such a script: it would be the script runs hourly to update the schedule of campaigns. So, for example, if you want to update the script, and then the changes would be reflected the next time you actually run that script. In terms of bidding, the campaigns are incompatible with, say, if you have pre-existing ad schedules. So if you have set up a pre-existing ad schedule to an event, like one of the questions was speaking about how do you set up your campaign for an annual event. So those are like pre-existing schedules. So it might not work in this case because this is more dynamic. And it's effectively more dynamic in a view if you want to see and you want to change and be more aggressive with your approach. You could set bid modification ranges between -90% to about 900%, and the uplift duration can range about 15 to 180 minutes. And the last one would be about time zones. You should check whether the account is set up to recognize daylight savings. As you know, the end of this week, the clocks go back. Yeah, so it just gives you a better idea of how to use this more effectively. Second type of script I would like to speak about is the countdown scripts. It's quite similar to a sales countdown, if not within the context of sports betting, but how it works is you could display up-to-date dynamic values in your ad text and can make the campaign more compelling for the viewers. The script essentially shows how to update your ad parameters hourly to count down, say, for until a free bet offer you're likely going to promote expires. So it, like you see in the image below, if you have a Super Sunday event and you're counting down to that event, it just lets customers know that the event's at this specific time, and we're basically counting down to that event. It's a good aggressive strategy as well. In terms of countdown customizers, come in both the countdown and global countdown formats. It's essentially two different formats where you are consistently counting down globally for, say, every similar set of matches every weekend, or you're just counting down to a one-off event, say a cup final in football. So essentially, it comes down to a set of time adjusted to the time zone of that person or a punter who's willing to make that bet or searching for it. A global countdown essentially comes down to a global time that's consistent to your account zone. So if an ad says your free bet offer ends in 4 hours in London, it will also say it ends in 4 hours in, say, New York or California. So both of these countdown functions essentially count down by day, then by the hour and the minute. So again, if your free bet offer, that especially for new acquisitions, you're talking about a free bet offer, you talk about a free bet offer that ends in 3 hours, and then using the countdown customizer, after about 2.5 hours, the countdown function would essentially say your free bet offer ends in 30 minutes. So you can set up these countdowns in any ad text, responsive search ad, or dynamic search ad. And again, if you want to say an upcoming free bet offer for Super Sunday, the script basically calculates how many days and hours remain until that Super Sunday match day, and then finds specific ad groups set up for this promotion, and then updates the ad parameters for all the keywords in that ad group with the results of the calculation. The script generally assumes you have a single ad group for which you want to run this promotion, but you could also run this for multiple ad groups. And about keywords, since you're updating the ad parameters tied to your keywords, that generally allows you to make an ad copy more dynamic. You could also modify these keywords within those scripts. Once the countdown has finished to the match and the match has started, you could essentially use this during in-play of matches, and you could change the verbiage of the offer to promote it in play or during games, especially at the end of periods or a halftime push. Just to go, I've seen many markets on Sky Bet and Paddy Power just promoting, say, a game of two halves market, generally during halftime. So you could use countdown scripts for your campaigns. The next one would be Google Ad Scripts with ad customizers. So essentially, you're displaying up-to-date and dynamic values within your ad text. The Google Ad Scripts with ad customizers, if you could link up your live data source to reflect all the current prices of the markets, I think essentially it keeps changing over time. It helps you give you more contextual information. So the script basically sets up parameterized ads for the latest set of odds, which is again sometimes largely driven closer to match times by bet volumes, and you could store these in Google spreadsheets. And an ad can be set up when someone searches for a specific kind of betting market. So the ad would be customized to show the selection and its price. So when someone searches for a more generic term like a free bet, the ad essentially shows all the qualifying matches for those free bets. As you know, free bets could be can be like marketed for only a few games and sometimes not the big day events or like the Super Sunday events. And the ad customizers can be applied on a campaign or ad group level, not just on a keyword level. And it also helps you collect stats that you could analyze and report on separately to your business leaders. So in terms of how it works, ad customizers could be applied to the whole account or be targeted to like specified campaigns, ad groups, or keywords. In the case of betting, a script essentially creates ad customizers for each match or market in a spreadsheet, which will then show up when the market is searched for. And based on those qualifiers that you have provided in relevance to the game time or the offer that you're likely to promote. And you could use the APIs to like pull the live sources of data where you have the prices, and then you could connect them to Google Sheets. Again, giving you that extra layer of contextual information. Just to talk about having a more advanced strategy, obviously in an industry where the pricing is ever changing, almost every second, there's a big role that needs to be played in new user acquisition due to the campaign performance being largely affected by ensuring all your budgets go onto the right offers you have on display. So it's very pivotal to use the right partners or the tools or the tech that you can create a strategy which adapts to the triggers and gives you that control in being aggressive towards paid search. As you know, like in terms of new user acquisition, there are many odds checker websites already out there. So it's always key that you use these maybe through APIs or if you have providers who provide you with live price information and fit this through your through Search Ads 360. It might be potentially an expensive ordeal for many, but in terms of the bigger players, it essentially helps you basically sets you apart from other bookmakers. And as you, I'm not quite sure, but as of my opinion, I don't think many competitors actually use any live odds to drive campaigns or click-through rates or conversions. So you could use SEO 360 to leverage your live feed of odds to build keywords out of scale across all your offers, and you could also include the details and the pricing of your offer in your ad copy. Also, you can this way you could capitalize on or understand the ever-changing levels of interest, including countdowns to say kickoff or tip-off, off games, and that basically allows you to like bid aggressively when the interest is at its peak. Lastly, I would want to speak about what many people are trying to do within this context. I think hashtag request a bet or hashtag free bets are very trending hashtags on Twitter, and many punters who are betting on the day or betting a week in advance use these bets. So hashtag request a bet is essentially driven by the audience, driven by the bet volumes that come in. So you could request any sort of bet you think is ideal for the match day based on whatever information that you've received on different media. So how could you actually connect this to your Google scripts? You could obviously connect, use Google scripts as a countdown script, and then you could scrape information. It's a bit of a learning curve, but there's a lot of code out there that you could use, either RTweet or Scrapey or Beautiful. So these are libraries within Python or R that help you scrape interesting information about what the public thinks, and basically gives you that extra sort of gives you a step ahead, and allows you to plan and promote the right offers. Because most of the time when you're trading a game of football or horse racing, and when you get a request to bet, is when you essentially use that as a market to offer to the public. But if you use a script to like a Python script to like pull up hashtag request a bet a week in advance or just a day in advance, based on say a new injury information that's received in the public media, you could use that to inform your campaigns as well. Also, what expected value is a common is a very interesting trending topic in not just horse racing, football and rugby, and all different sports. It is being developed currently, and it's been spoken about in all public channels, and you could use this expected value to say drive a campaign, like expected goals. You could always say if Arsenal's playing Liverpool, you can always say Arsenal expected to score 1.6 or 1.7 goals, and then add that level of contextual information behind your campaign offer if you're going to offer a free bet or just request a bet. So yeah, I mean, that's all from my side. If you have any sort of questions, feel free to drop them in the chat window, and yeah, and I'll be happy to share any sort of links to the Google scripts that are primarily written in JavaScript, or give you any links that will help you share scrape social channels. And yeah, so please drop me a note if you wish on the email ID below, or you could also reach out to Emilia in terms of asking any questions. But we'd be happy to like take any questions now.
Hi, thanks for that, Vignesh. Lots of stuff there which I had absolutely no idea about previously, so I'm not entirely some of it went a bit over my head really. But I'm interested in, do you have some examples of how using that kind of those scripts and so on, does it produce better results? Or have you done any sort of research, or do you have any data on that tells you that's more effective for certain markets? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what markets you're trying to campaign, and like Emilia was saying, you have to have that intuition of what works best and use a mix of manual and automation techniques. So you could use a few scripts that you could use in other sectors to automate a few processes that you could use in the betting sector as well. Like I was mentioning, you could use countdown scripts, and these are just a few scripts. But given you're a campaign manager and at a betting company, and you have a big idea or a broad idea of what takes most time in your day. And if you have a dynamic sort of aggressive strategy that you're hoping to achieve, then you could sort of start visiting or looking at these scripts that could really be useful. Given in most betting organizations, if they work closely, and a lot of times they do work closely with the trading team, where they're trying to make different offers. So it's all about working in cohesion with them and saying, okay, this is, and majority of times you use it to like bid aggressively for new acquisitions. You could also use it in play, and it might take some time to say, if you have consistent match times, say like the word hashtag Super Sunday is very known and comes on the telly as well. So you could use that because that's going to be the same, and then you could filter down into having a script saying hashtag Super Sunday is the main event, right? And then you have teams under it, and these are, you don't really need to know that like a week in advance. The TV schedules are out well in advance, so you could use that to your advantage. And I think Natalia spoke about a wardrobe malfunction in the Super Bowl. Now, it got me reminded of an FA Cup game where I think Arsenal playing a League One or National League side, and it was a bet on the goalkeeper eating a pie during halftime. So those are things that you have some contextual information in advance. But what you could do is, like, a lot of media channels are covering these very levels of insights on Twitter, on different channels. So you could literally scrape, and it doesn't take too long. You could just follow a few channels, you follow a few hashtags, and it's everything you need really. It gives you a good idea and puts you well in advance, like a step ahead.
Sure. Okay. And is running these campaigns sort of during games and so on, is that do you find that to be effective in driving sort of first time deposits? Because there's obviously a little bit of time taken in the sign up process.
Yeah.
If you haven't used that bookmaker before, so I'm just wondering how responsive that is in those timescales.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is projecting an offer. So if you project an offer at halftime, even if they don't sign up during that halftime, or even if they can't bet during that, I've seen bookmakers offer the same offer for the next day weekend. So essentially you are acquiring customers. It may not be for that game or match day, but you are selling what you acquired to sell, and then you could have them. And there are ways you could even look into looking at acquisition, not just by if someone's gone to your website and then they've looked at a few offers and then not signed up through that website, and there's no way to track it. You could track it in other ways. So yeah, I mean, it might not be useful during halftime, and I don't think it could be measured, because there's always going to be a big bias in that. You might have a day where it might drive a lot of interest, and other sets of days the interest might be very varied. So yeah, like I said, and it's always key to if you have a good understanding of how to be intuitive in your bidding strategy, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so just wonder if anyone else has any questions before we finish off. If you either want to, you can speak up or just post them in the chat. Either way. But in the meantime, I guess how would people get hold of Blueclaw team? Because I guess if people have more substantial questions and are interested in maybe having a chat about working with you in the future, you'd like them to be you'd like them to get in touch. What's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, you could reach out to any of the speakers today. I think all of them are well versed with what they've presented. But just in terms of reaching out, you could directly just search us up, and then I think we are quite responsive, and quite helpful, each of us. So, but Emilia, do you have any thoughts that you want to add as well?
No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, our website's blueclaw.co.uk, so feel free to reach out to us on there. There's contact information and emails and everything, but you can reach us through there, or we can pass on our emails again if you wanted to come directly to us with any specific questions as well.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Just see a question in the chat, someone asking whether there'll be a recording available of this. I'll just, if you email me, just stick my email address in there. If you email me with the request, I will arrange that. I will arrange that for you. So, sorry, there's a bit of a SBC team having a bit of a chat about what we'll do about that. But yes, in short, there will be a copy of the session available, both parts of that. So with that, just like to say thank you to everyone at Blueclaw for 2 very interesting and I think valuable sessions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so
very
much.
All right, thanks.